On Wednesday night, I had a movie clip of the movie Finding Nemo, and of course we had all these kids here. It's Wednesday night, it's learning night, and when they come to worship, and I said, you know what? If you come back on Sunday, I'll show you more of the movie Finding Nemo. We'll have to wait. And you know, I love what's happening with Pixar. Pixar is one of the animation arms of Disney, because it's not just a bunch of cartoons. They're telling wonderful stories, and Finding Nemo is one of them. I told the group on Wednesday night, I said, there's 4 or 5 sermons in there, so you're going to get 2. You're going to get one Wednesday night. You're going to get one today. I could do an entire sermon series just on Pixar movies, because they speak to the deepest longings of the human heart, and the way those longings are satisfied through love, through forgiveness, through care, through redemption. And yeah, it's just a movie, but it's really about more than that. So the clip I was going to show you today, this movie came out in 2003. How many of you have been living under a rock and have not seen this movie for the last 15 years? Okay, well, you're probably not going to raise your hand after I introduce it like that anyway. But there's a portion in the movie where Marlon, the father, has been out looking for his son, and he ends up in the East Australian Current, and with some turtles, including this big old guy who's 150 years old. His name is Crush. And so it starts out where all of the children of Crush and the other turtles are asking Nemo, or asking Marlon why he's here, and he begins to tell the story. It's a story about a heartbroken father, and a son who has been taken away from him. And you know, the thing about this is, the thing about this particular part of the movie is, it's really interesting how news travels. And he starts telling this story, and pretty soon it cuts away to a scene where one of the baby turtles is talking to the fish. And he's telling the fish about how they encountered sharks to find, so that Marlon could find his son. And then from the fish, it goes to the lobsters. And then from the lobsters, it goes to the swordfish. And then from the swordfish, it goes to the dolphins. And then it goes to the birds. And the story keeps going on and on and on, how this brave, courageous father is looking for his son and will go to the ends of the earth to find his son. And so the story finally ends up in Sydney Harbor, where someone who knows the little boy who's lost, the little lost clownfish named Nemo, hears the story. And he finds Nemo, and he runs to tell him. And he lays out the whole thing. And you know, at first, it's such a fantastic story that Nemo doesn't believe it. He said, "That can't be my dad. Sharks? I don't think so." That's because the father that he thought he knew was a father of rules. He got lost because he got mad at his dad, who set up all these rules. He knew a father that was cautious. He knew a father that was overprotective. And so the father set up rules and put fences around him, set up all these guidelines. And it was, to Nemo, it was as if the guidelines were the only thing in the world that mattered. Well, I thought about that as I thought about what I would say to you today. Because in my experience, when I visit with people about the Christian faith, especially, well, everybody really, but especially people who are not regular attenders here, I think they have this idea, this misperception about who God is and what God cares about. And yeah, they all know the story. We all know the story. We know that God is a God of love. And we know that he sent Jesus to die on the cross, that he comes to us, right? We know this story well. But it's such a fantastic story that we say, that can't possibly be him. And instead we default to this God who's a God of rules, who's a God that sets boundaries. And it looks to us as if those boundaries are the only thing that matter to this God. And of course, where does that leave us? If boundaries are the only thing that matters to God, I'm not good enough. I don't belong here. But what if the God you think you know isn't the God you really have? What if everything you think you understand about God in terms of the boundaries and all these misperceptions, what if none of that is true? And what if the only thing that matters to this God is that he seeks you out and he finds you who are lost? Let's sing. Okay, so we're going to shift gears here a little bit. I remembered when I was writing the sermon, I remembered something that happened to me a couple of years ago, and it's sort of a common occurrence evidently, but it's something that I had never experienced before this. It was summertime. It was a hot summer day, and I was driving across Minnesota. I was by myself heading back from vacation. I don't remember why Jill and the kids weren't with me, but I was by myself going back. And it was one of those hot days where when you look out over the horizon, especially as you're looking across the pavement, you can see the heat waves. It just shimmers a little bit. Well, off in the distance, right in front of me, was a big blue lake. And I kept driving. I thought, well, I'm going to come to a lake. But I never got there because it wasn't a lake. It was a mirage. And you know, if I were lost and thirsty, I would keep driving towards that thing, further and further away, and just keep going and going and going, and I would never get there, because in the end, what I'm seeing, that thing that would satisfy my thirst, doesn't really exist. When I think about us being lost, I also like the image of being thirsty, because our souls are thirsty in so many ways. We are thirsty for approval. We are thirsty for someone to care about us. As Freddie Mercury likes to say, want to find someone to love me, or someone to love. I want to find somebody to love. And we thirst for those things. We thirst for approval. We thirst for self-satisfaction. And you know, the world offers all kinds of answers to that. And we buy into those answers all the time. And some of them are answers that seem like they ought to work, but they don't. Some of the answers in terms of our thirst is, well, if I buy enough stuff, that will satisfy my soul. And that one's pretty easy to see through, right? Because after you buy a few things and it satisfies you for a moment, and then you toss it aside and you go to the store and get something else that satisfies you, pretty soon you realize, well, this isn't doing it, right? But then there's other things that look like they'd be true satisfactions of the soul, answers to that problem. Like family. We turn to our parents and we look to them for approval. And we keep doing it over and over and over again. I know 60-year-olds who have been doing this for the last 60 years. We look to our spouse We look to our children. We look for all kinds of ways to show people that we're worth something. And you know, there's nothing wrong with family. Don't get me wrong. It's one of the greatest gifts that God could give us. But if we're looking to family, if we're looking to other people to satisfy the deepest longings of our hearts, we're doing two things. First of all, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. And second of all, we're laying a really heavy burden on someone or someones who can't possibly give you what you need. We just keep driving towards that mirage. And it's out there all the time, the big blue lake that's going to satisfy us. And we keep going and going and going. But it isn't real. It's not out there. I'm not saying family isn't real. But if you're looking to them to satisfy this, to fill that cup, it's not going to happen. We have to look for deeper things. Lesson Tom just read was talking about a people who were lost and alone and without a shepherd. And that's what it's like. Looking for satisfaction in all the wrong places. Let's sing. So isn't it interesting how news travels? It starts with a father who is heartbroken because a world has taken away the children that he loves. And as the story unfolds, the story travels ahead of him. It goes from person to person to person. One heart to another, some of whom are still lost themselves. Until finally that story is overheard by someone who knows a lost child, a lost person. It's the story of the gospel, my friends. It's the story of the way we talk about a God of love. And we tell that story to each other. And so I tell you that story today, one person to another, one heart to another. And maybe you're one of those lost people. And it's a fantastic story, and it's hard to believe. But it touches your heart, and it changes you. And then you think of someone who you know who is lost and alone. And they've tried all the mirages to satisfy that thirsty, longing, lost soul. But it doesn't work. And so you share it with them. And they at first say, that can't possibly be. The story is too fantastic. The God I know is a God of rules. The God I know, the Father I know, is a God who sets boundaries, and all that matters are those boundaries. But what if everything you think you know about that God isn't true? What if the God you think you know isn't at all the God who is real in your lives? Because this God seeks you out. This God finds you. This God goes through the darkest and most benevolent places in the world fights through them to look for you, to find you, to make you his own. See, in the end, the problem with the mirages is that it's you seeking the answer. But what really satisfies the soul is someone else who is seeking you. Someone else who loves you so much that he's willing to give up everything he has, including life itself, so that he can find you and save you. We can't fill our own cup. It comes from the love of another. And not just any other, but the Father and author of the universe. Imagine that. He sees you. He cares about you. And he drops everything he is and everything he has to come and find you. That love fills your soul like none other. So, my friends, the Father tells his story and he goes on his journey. But the story travels ahead of him. Now you've heard it. Now you know it. Is there anyone you've met who is one of those lost children? Tell them. Share it. For this is an answer that is greater than any answer the world can provide. And this is a water that quenches every thirst of the human heart. And for that we give him thanks and praise. Amen.